The known fact that Zimbabwe has been in some form of isolation internationally. But from a regional point of view, I think one of the successes of regional collaboration has been the SADC Power Pool. In fact, it was actually motivated and initiated out of the Zimbabwe Electric Supply Authority, and by recognition at the time by our government and management at what is called ZESA, to ensure that there's energy stability as well as securing supply in the future. And it was common knowledge that the whole region was going to be in significant deficit in the ensuing years. And when you consider that the southern part of the continent is very energy heavy use, sitting around and looking for short-term solutions in the midst of a crisis that wasn't going to be appropriate. So the SADC Power Pool was instituted. The Secretariat, as you correctly state, is in Zimbabwe and has grown from strength to strength. In fact, there is talk of incorporating the remaining members of the SADC collective, but the net effect of it has been the ability to maintain a power supply to both domestic and industrial concerns that is not the optimum, but at least has allowed things to continue going. And now the question is around how you make the power pool energy not only sufficient, but also it's got to be cost effective. Because it's one thing for me to sell my power to you as a neighbor, but if I'm selling the power to you at a premium price, that is not necessarily good for me as a consuming member. And I think the conversations are now happening around how the cost of that power could be reduced. And the onset of independent power providers in the various jurisdictions could be one way of addressing this, because they especially the smaller power providers will be able to localize supply to small domestic consumption, and then the base load supply coming from the region would go to heavy users such as your mines and your manufacturing sector. So it has been, I would say, on the balance, very successful, and is a model for, I think, the rest of the continent to replicate from. In our firm, we are currently seized with mandates that cover the spectrum of your alternatives. We are working on solar, we're working on wind, and then mini hydros have been relatively successful over and above your standard base supply out of your large hydro and the thermal. So the alternatives are certainly being incorporated into the way power is produced and consumed in Zimbabwe. In fact, there's a project that is currently underway that has been funded by the African Development Bank for rooftop solar, and is actually being used as a pilot, which could be replicated in other jurisdictions. And I think a lot of it is on the back of a very liberal, and this is something I'll talk to later on during the course of the conference in the week. We've got a very liberal legislative framework for power provision and generations and transmission in Zimbabwe. And I think when you take away the veneer of sovereign risk and any other political permutations that people have been sort of afraid of, and they start looking at the raw data around the regulation, you tend to find that we are a viable energy production and energy source market.